This happened last summer when I was 16. We had bought a Great Dane puppy named Kingsley the previous fall, and whenever I'd stay up late at night, he'd stay up with me. Since he was still fairly young, I had to take him outside right before I went to bed, or else he would have an accident, which meant I took my dog on a lot of quick walks around the park across the street from my house in Minneapolis late at night. I was always on the lookout for suspicious strangers, since our house had been broken into before, and it wasn't uncommon for homeless or drunk people to be messing around in the park. I wouldn't say I was used to sketchy things happening around my area because it's not really a dangerous area, but I felt I had a fair handle on how to react in these sort of situations. This night in particular, I was walking Kingsley around 1 AM and he had pooped, so I was taking the bag to the garbage bin at the far end of the park. It's not a very big park and you can almost always see my house from wherever you are standing, but it was dark out and I felt uncomfortable walking so far away. I never locked the door because I usually take him out just to pee and then return. I can see my door at all times. So, I go to the very end of the park and threw the baggie away, and right then and there, a red car with dark windows drives down the street towards me. They drive slower and slower until they finally slow down to a stop right next to me. There's no stop sign there or anything. They just stopped with the car still running. I couldn't see inside any of the windows. I got a weird feeling and pulled my dog back towards my house. In my head I was thinking that maybe they are just trying to park on the side of the road. Or maybe they like my dog. It sounds dumb now, but it had been a couple of times before where people would slow down and roll down their windows and make some harmless jokes about Kingsley because he looked ridiculous as a puppy. Regardless, I returned with the dog and started to speed walk back to my house. Here's what really freaked me out. Once I turned to go back to my house, I intentionally walked behind this group of trees just in case the people in the car tried anything. I was expecting them to turn down the street heading away from me, but instead, they turned down my street, which is a one-way street with very clear signs going the opposite direction. I thought, okay, this is a little weird. I better wait right here. And I squatted down with Kingsley. As they turned down my street, they turned their headlights off. I couldn't come up with any logical reason they would do that. It was very dark out and I could still see the outline of their car as it drove slowly down my one-way street. My heart was racing. Kingsley didn't understand what we were doing, but I held onto his collar and kept him next to me until their car left my sight, which felt like eternity as they were driving very cautiously. As soon as I couldn't see them anymore, I hauled ass out from underneath the trees, across the street and straight back to my house, slammed my door shut, locked it, and then ran upstairs. I could see the red car starting to make another go around the park, this time with their headlights back on, and all I could think was, what do I do? As my mum was asleep and I didn't know whether to call the police or not. Our front door is basically a large window, so I made sure to stay away from it so that the red car couldn't see me and where I lived. We also have 3 very large picture windows on our first floor, so I peeked out from a side window where I felt safe out of view and told myself, okay, if they drive by again, I'm calling the police. Luckily, I didn't see the car again, but it still scares me to take my dog out late at night, even though he's the size of a small horse now and barks like a monster. This experience was legit one of the most terrifying things that's ever happened to me while I was walking my dog, and he's done some weird stuff. So, back in 2015, I had the choice of getting a dog or getting a smartphone. I'd never had a dog in my life, or a decent phone come to think of it, and I'd been saving up for a phone anyhow, so naturally, I picked a dog. My dad knew a guy who had a couple of border collies that had recently had a litter, so We drove out and the dude gave me his last pup. Enter Bailey. A couple of weeks after he got his shots, I started walking him. My parents figured I was going to be hanging out at the local park with my new pup, so I could get him socialized. But no, I chose to take him around the perimeter of my nearby farm to keep the farm dog in him. I'd been sneaking out to this farm for years. The farmer was an old family friend. My uncles had grown up working for him, so I knew if I was ever caught, I could just drop their name. On either side of the farm, there was some thick woodland, which no one had ever given me a reason to be wary of. They probably should have. So, it's a sunny afternoon. It had been pouring down all week and Bailey was itching for a good walk. I take him to the farm at our usual time and we start making our way around to the woods on the east side of the farm. Everything is quiet, but Bailey keeps darting away from me to explore. He's a puppy, it's what they do, but of course, I'd been calling his name all the way around the field. We're about halfway past the woods. I could see the roof of the farmhouse over the next hill. Bailey's been pulling crap out of the bushes all the way along, and I'd just given him trouble for rolling in a pile of fox crap. That's when I hear a man's voice calling my dog by his name.
Bailey! Bailey!
This dude that I didn't even know was calling my dog by name. I knew it wasn't the farmer because I'd met him at family events like barbecues and weddings, etc. So I knew what his voice sounded like. I go completely silent, but the guy keeps calling on my dog. It sounds like he's deep into the woods and maybe moving. He's calling my dog with an excited tone in his voice, which is what creeps me out the most. Bailey, meanwhile, is completely ignoring this guy and sniffing the now flat pile of poop. I'm like a tiny 18-year-old girl. The most combat experience I have is a month learning taekwondo when I was 11. And I don't have a mobile phone. If that guy works out where I am, I'm screwed. And if Bailey decides to go in after him, I'm double screwed. Because I am not letting a possible psycho get his hands on my puppy. I can either run to the farm, which isn't too far away, or run back through the field towards home. I pick up my dog and sprint across the field. Behind me I hear someone emerge from the woods, but I'm already over the fence and sprinting back home with my puppy, tucked under my arm. I get home and tell my mum. She brushes it off as some weird drunk guy. A few weeks later, I'm at my uncle's house and the farmer walks in. I told my uncle what happened, so he brings it up. The farmer asks exactly which woods I'd been close to and that some of his clothes had gone missing from his washing line. He'd put it down to strong winds, but now he's not sure. I take him and my uncle to the exact spot the next day, and all three of us go in and find a completely wrecked campsite. A campsite that shouldn't have been there. There's no clothes or anything, but the tent has completely collapsed on itself. There's no fire, but there are some empty gas canisters like you'd use for a portable stove and empty packets of food scattered everywhere. We report it to the police, but nothing really comes of it, except that I got a phone not long after that and keep it on me wherever I go. It was a Sunday, early in the morning. I live in the suburbs, but my parents own a farm that I enjoy going to because I get to see my dog. Her name is Molly. She's a mutt. But she's not a tiny dog by any means. At that time I felt very safe around her and would often take her for walks in a forest that was nearby. The day started off like any other. Me and my dad got in the car, drove around for a while and arrived at the farm. I immediately got out of the car and hugged Molly. My parents always got angry when I hugged her since I'd smell like her for the rest of the day. I put her leash on and asked my dad if I could take her for a walk. He always thought that we would just go down a road and back, but I always found it more interesting to take her to the forest. I always felt a certain kind of peace and relaxation there that was unmatched by anything else. So, we took a turn and headed to the forest. Usually when we got there, I'd take her leash off so she could explore on her own. Most of the time I'd carve my name into the trees or look for anything interesting. I was playing baseball with some rocks and a wooden leg, presumably from an old table, and then I heard it. Molly was barking at something. This wasn't usual when we were in the forest. I thought it was a fox or some other animal, so I quickly grabbed the wooden leg like a weapon. I knew that if it was a fox, I wouldn't attack it, but I had a sense of security while I was holding it. I called out, "Molly! Molly!" But she just kept barking. This was very strange for me, since she always came to me when I called her. I followed the sound of her barks and stumbled across a scene I'll never forget. There was a man, probably in his late 50s, half naked, carrying a large machete in one hand and holding a moonshine in the other. This was the first time that I stumbled across someone in the woods, let alone someone half naked and carrying a big-ass machete. He was completely ignoring Molly and hacking away at the ground for some reason. I didn't really know how to handle the situation. Even now, I have no idea how I would handle it. "Sir, are you okay?" I asked in confusion. I don't think I understood the seriousness of the situation at the time. He turned around, revealing his face. He had some of the clearest blue eyes I had ever seen to this day. I could see them so well because they were wide open.
Come here, boy. Look what I've dug up.
I was afraid that if I didn't listen to him, he would start chasing after me, and that was something that I wanted to avoid at all costs. I got closer but kept a good distance. I didn't see anything except for an empty hole. He returned to hitting the ground with his machete, occasionally taking sips from the bottle. I used this window of time to get my dog and started walking away slowly as to not notify him that I was leaving. But then, I looked one final glance at the man. His head was dug deep in the hole. I was intrigued, so I kept looking. I know, how stupid of me. He finally got up from the ground, and I was shocked when I saw him carrying a bone in his mouth. I have no idea what animal it belonged to, if it even did belong to an animal. I'd seen enough and started sprinting with my dog. As we ran, I heard him laughing, and then I saw something flying from the corner of my eye. It was that damn machete. I heard him yell,
Damn it.
This made me run even faster. I know the forest very well, so I wasn't afraid of getting lost. I ripped through branches and bushes until I got out of that forest, but I didn't stop sprinting until I arrived at the garage, where my father was testing out lights on our tractor. I didn't tell him a single thing about the man, since I was afraid that he'd get angry and wouldn't allow me to walk Molly anymore. Needless to say, I never went into that forest alone ever again. I took my 3-month-old puppy out for an early evening walk along the Lakeshore trail. We were on our way back south to my apartment building and had been walking for about an hour, so I stopped at a fountain along the trail to fill up his water bowl and get him hydrated. The fountain is at a crossroads of 2 different parts of the trail. 2 men, who looked about mid to late 20s, walked past as I stopped, and they also stopped at the crossroads a few feet ahead of me. They were just standing there, not really talking, and they kept looking back at me. They were also weirdly wearing puffy winter coats, and it was hot out, around 70 or so. My first thought is that maybe they wanted to pet my puppy. He's super cute and it's very common that we get stopped for this. And my second thought is that it's a secret exchange scenario, and they were waiting for me to leave. Not uncommon in my large city. Also, not my business. Pup finishes his water and we walk past. The men are silent. Just beyond the crossroads is a tunnel to the right that goes under an expressway that runs parallel to the Lakeshore trail. The tunnel takes you to the neighborhood that's on the other side of the expressway. I decide to go through the tunnel because my pup is getting really distracted by the lake activity and I want to get back home quickly. The neighborhood is more quiet and less distracting. On the other side of the tunnel, we reach a crosswalk and wait to turn left to keep going south. The men emerge from the tunnel just a few seconds behind us. No cause for alarm. Maybe they were heading our direction. We walk another block with the men behind us and reach another crosswalk with a green light that is a few seconds from running out. I get my pup to run through the crosswalk with me so that the men have to stop and we can create some distance between them and us. People following behind me makes me nervous in general. I'm a petite woman, and I acknowledge that I was conditioned in my childhood to be guarded in public. So, in these instances I usually create distance, calm down, and remind myself that I'm not in danger. I slow down my run about halfway through the next block, tell my pup he's a good boy, and glance back for good measure. The men are maybe 2 yards behind me. What? Now I'm really nervous. I get to the next crosswalk and have to stop. I glance back again and the men are right behind me, both staring right at me. When the light turns green, I just pick up my pup in my arms and speed walk and jog through the crosswalk. Thankfully my building was on the next corner and I bolt in past my doorman. The men had crossed the street too, and once they saw me get into the building, they turned around and headed back the opposite direction. And that was the last I saw of them, and to this day I have no idea what their intentions were.